Roth's ashes from, Sherry Roth asked us to take Jeff's ashes over from St. John's because he always wanted to go to Israel, never could. But she said, when you take Linda's ashes, will you take some of his? And we did, and we had 2 services, one for Jeff and one for Linda. And we returned in 66 and 67, and just after that was the Six-Day War, which transformed the Middle East, and the aftermath of that is still, of course, unfolding. But in 1969, I had a phone call from Mark Tannenbaum, who was with Rabbi Jim Rudin, colleagues, and we got involved right then and there in the continuing dealing with the way in which major segments of mainline Christianity turned against Israel after the Six-Day War. And this has been an ongoing, unfolding dynamic that we're still dealing with today at the Presbyterian General Assemblies when we deal with the boycott, divest, sanction movements. And sometimes when Jim and I look at this together, we say, this is deja vu all over again. But we've been in these trenches for over 50 years together. And, you know, it's like a football game, you know, hit that line for 2 yards at a time, and it keeps on. But the Lord is giving us strength, and we know that that Israel is precious to him, and we count on his strength to do what we need to do. And now we're getting ready for the 50th tour in February, and we have the opportunity for anyone here who wants to go with Ian and me to Israel. And you've heard me say that more than once. Okay. Now I have a present for you all before you go. The book you signed in is sitting over boxes of books. And what are those books? 2 States for 2 Peoples, which we worked hard on for a year and a half, and we had it at this last General Assembly. And thankfully the last General Assembly affirmed, and Bill Borer has been involved in this too because he was at General Assemblies and he was terrific. He's a terrific, quote, church politician, if that could be considered a good thing. And so,
it's not.
I know you were going to say that, but in any case, but 2 States for 2 Peoples. There's a copy for anyone who wants one, and if you want me to sign it, I will. It's your gift from this birthday party from me, and I've been giving it to people, but I can't keep up with giving it to everybody or put one in the mail every day. So this is great. A lot of you are going to get one, and I encourage you to take one. At Union Seminary in the 60s, let's also remember that the civil rights movement was front and center. And I got involved with that already a little bit. Actually, at Williams, I was involved with the Hungarian refugees, because the Soviet Union invaded Hungary, and we were involved with that. But at Union, I got involved in the civil rights, as everyone at Union was. And and although I was in graduate school and studying, we were raising money, which I've been doing all my life, but we were raising money for the Freedom Riders to have a hotline, an 800 number, so if they got in trouble, and we had to hook up these hotlines in different places in the South so they could call if they needed to. We were, and you know, at that time, Martin Luther King Jr. became my hero. He became one of my heroes. He and W.D. Davies were formative in my thinking at that point in history. We went to Margaretville and New Kingston in the 70s, and there were born Ruth, Sonia named for Sonia Kadetz, who was our Jewish mother in Jerusalem, Ruth named for Ruth Blagg, Linda's mother, Tamar, a wonderful Hebrew name, Doris, named for my mother, John, named for Linda's father, Brewster, named for my grandfather, Galilee, named for the Sea of Galilee and the Galilee, the redemptive arena for God's return in the eschaton, Thomas, for Thomas Shaw, Linda's grandfather, Nathaniel, who was an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile, sitting under the fig tree, and Robert, who was Linda's brother. And then, you know, born into our family at that time also were cousins Carlotta and Tommy, and Megan and Mogi, Jean and Chogi, Charlie. Where's Charlie? Is he around? He's here somewhere. Okay, he's in there. Okay, and they're here, and we're so thankful that they are. And then Zachary and Eva, of course, were born to Beth. So we talked about that. And then I want to say that we also have 3, as Ian said, like family members, like their family. and that's Ian and Justin and Fern. And they're so close with the family. Their family. Okay. And then I got involved in a campaign for Congress, as you know, and there was a wonderful story about that. There was a fellow named Adolph Coletti who helped me campaign. He was from Cornell, and he went to, he came and stayed at our house in Margaretville overnight on the way to a meeting that was involved in the congressional race. And there was a bed at the top of the stairs that I used to go sleep in when I got home late on the campaign, so as not to wake Linda or the kids up. And so we put Adolph in that room, and he told me later, he said, you know what I remember from that time in Margaretville? He said, I stayed in that bed, and he said, and what happened was the kids would know I was in that bed. So they would go up and they'd climb in that bed and get in bed with me while I was sleeping. And I took that for granted because they wanted to be with me. But Adolph Coletti was there, so hey, any port in a storm. So all four kids crawled in bed with Adolph Coletti. And Adolph Coletti says to me, he said, I woke up in the morning, he said, I couldn't move my arms, I couldn't move my legs. And I said, what happened? Am I paralyzed? I looked around, I had 4 little kids in bed with me.
Bill, don't worry about your congressional race. The absentee ballots haven't been counted yet.
He hears you so hard.
Hugh Jones called me from Chambersburg and said, could you be interested in considering the parish here? And I didn't know exactly where Chambersburg was. But I said, I'm interested in talking with you, but there are 2 things that we need to know. One is I just finished a political campaign. Is that a negative? He said, no, a lot of people in the church are involved in the political arena, and they're committed to public and civic service. And then I said, the other thing is people need to know that I'm firmly and unequivocally in support of Israel, the people, land, and state. And is that going to be a problem? And he said, no, that's going to be a plus. So those were the things that needed to be cleared before we talked to the committee. And I thank God every day that we came here, and I thank God that Linda and I could be here together, and I thank God for this wonderful congregation, a number of whom are here with us, and for the relationships we've been able to share as a church family. Others had to leave a little bit early. And then, there are wonderful memories that I could go into, so many stories, I really can't tell them. We can tell more later, but I've told you one about Hal. I'll just tell you the one about Judge George Eppinger of blessed memory, who George liked to have the church service over exactly at noon, and George was very firm in his outlooks. And so when he would come out the door, and I went 5 minutes afterward, he'd say, the only overtime that's interesting is in an athletic contest. So I had a chance to coach basketball. And you saw the trophy out there. And I coached for 5 years with Sue Kaufman and Bill Logsdon of blessed memory. And John was playing, and one time the kids were practicing over at the rec center, and the kids got on the floor and they started swearing. And I said, okay, everybody in the bleachers. You kids get in the bleachers. I said, nobody is going to be on this team if you're going to swear. There can be no bad words, there can be no swearing, and they were sitting there like, oh. So anyway, we started practice again. So the next day, John goes to school at King Street, comes running home, and he was really very upset. And I said, Bud, what's wrong? And he said, the kids are really mad at me. And I said, why? He said, because you told them they couldn't swear. I said, I'm not having kids swear when they're playing basketball. He said, no, they thought you meant they couldn't swear at home either. So I told that story at the legendary Cafe Clash down at the Texas Lunch with Doug Neiman and Mel Fry and Menno Landis and C.Q. Smith and Dick Aveni that met, and Warren, you know about that legendary Cafe Clash down there. And when I told that story, Doug Neiman, and he said, I told them they couldn't swear at home either. Doug Neiman said, don't tell them any different. He was the director of the rec center, so don't tell them any different. So now what we've done here, we have people here today who have been, with whom I've worked so closely in the congregation and in the community, putting together the Holocaust Memorial Service, which we started with Rabbi Chernoff 38 years ago, the Martin Luther King service with Dr. John Rice and Rabbi Chernoff 39 years ago. The United Churches, the Letterkenny Chapel, you know, these are all enterprises that we've been involved in the community. With Bullpick, Jack and Isabel were here, and of course with the memorial. And Warren and Terry Punt and I were sitting in Greencastle at the truck stop when we first talked about how that might become a Veterans Memorial, and that was in 1996 when that started. And all these things have come with our working together and our opportunity to be together here in the community, and then with Bullpick, and then with the Chambersburg Area Improvement Association, and with Mike Waters of blessed memory, and Levester Taylor of blessed memory, and Larry Johnson. What a privilege it's been to be with all whom I've had the chance to work with in that regard. I did mention, of course, the pastors at Falling Spring, Rod and Jane Taylor, the Siglers, and our wonderful staff at Falling Spring, whom I've had the privilege of working with over the years. And what we have with us here, among those who have been part of that, were Megan and Don Baker, and of course Brad and Laura are here, and others whom we've worked with we remember Mark Lesher, and it was Mark that brought Fern here. And you know, the famous story of Mark Lesher and Bee Lesher, when they were having Laura, their second child, and she was expecting, and Lee and Dave Overcash were over at their house, and Dave Overcash says, well, what are you going to name the baby? And Bee says, well, we don't know, we've been thinking about that. And Lee says, well, you could name her Galilee. And Bee Lesher says, what kind of stupid parent would name a kid Galilee? she thought his name was Lee. And the whole place was catatonic for about 10 seconds. And then Mark said, Bee, actually Lee's name is Galilee. And, you know, of course, we never let her forget that. But, you know, that the people that we've worked with, Mark Foltz and Paul George, and you know, all the people that we've shared in the office with. Marshall, John Marshall, who inspected the property every night, and all during the building of the Family Life Center. And then what we went through with the initial restoration, and Sid and Ellen had to go home, but I wanted to give him credit. We had $100,000 of deferred maintenance the first year we were here, and he chaired that drive, and we had, and then we had church growth and all kinds of great things happen. And then Jim Moss came and did a 10-year plan for us in 1989, and he and John Boozer got involved together with that kind of planning, and Sid consented to chair the committee for the building of the FLC. And then we had, at the same time, the North End became available, and there were people involved who were raising money for the FLC and said, well, we can only do so much. But others said, we need to take the risk. And Sid, God bless him, and I wish he was here so I could compliment him, but I will anyway, and I have many times, said, we can take the risk. And when Sid, who was considered probably one of the most conservative finance people in Chambersburg, said, we can take the risk, well, we took the risk, and you know what? The Lord opened doors, and the whole project, North End and new building, were paid off in less than 5 years. And the building was dedicated in 1996 and was paid off. Those were paid off before 2000. And now, at that time, we approached Hubert McCleary about buying the property to the south end of the church, because we knew we needed more parking, and Jim Moss said we did, and Hubert said, well, we're not ready to sell. And the church wasn't ready quite to launch another yet major campaign. A lot had to happen in the meantime, and then Linda went to be with the Lord, and we had a time of transition. And then but at the time we were in the boardroom in 1991, Sid Palmer and C.Q. Smith and I and Hubert McCleary were there together, and Hubert said, we're not ready to sell the property, and we said, well, can we get a first refusal? And Hubert said, yes, I'll give you a first refusal. And Sid said, can you write it down? And Hubert said, my handshake is good enough. And for 25 years, his handshake has been good enough, and we've finally been able. Thank the Lord, on August 28th, I am just so ecstatic about this. And Pete has been the one who has been the prime mover in all this, and kind of, we've consulted with Sid and with others, Warren and others, but we've been able to, and of course this wasn't myself, there was a committee that was chaired by the trustees and was through the session. But just personally, from the point of view of praying about this for 25 years, I was just ecstatic when the congregation voted unanimously to move ahead with a memorial park at the south end of the property, going all the way through to King Street. And now with this new restaurant developing and other developments downtown with the Coyle Library, this is going to be a major contribution to what we're all concerned about, which is rejuvenating and regenerating life in the downtown for persons of all walks of life, all age groups, and all income levels. And this is very, very important for our community. I can go on and on, but I'm going to quit here in about 2 seconds. So let me just say, for any of you, there's some sayings I have that and then nationally, of course, the other thing is how ecstatic I am about the Harts, Andy and Laura, and about them being here as our pastors. So, how does it feel to be 80? It feels one day older. I'm incredibly grateful, and I recognize that every day is a gift. And I have a few phrases that I like to share with people, and you've heard them many times. One is, remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. Secondly, there is no I in team. Thirdly, haste is of the devil. Fourthly, my father's favorite phrase when there was something he absolutely did not want to do, include me out. Fifthly, John's message to Linda on his 15th birthday when he and she were going head to head, which was with a picture of a boat saying, with an inscription saying, this was her birthday present, you can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails. Oswald Chambers, who said this, thank God we are going to heaven when we die, but thank God we aren't going before we die, i.e. there's work to be done. And so the other phrase is, you do not have because you do not ask. So, whether it's BOPIC, or whether it's the Veterans Memorial, or whether it's the United Churches, or whether it's supporting the people, land, and state of Israel, expect somebody to ask you for help with that at some point. We do not have because we do not ask. And Yitzhak Adlerstein, Jim did a beautiful piece for the Religious News Service honoring my 80th birthday, which is all out on the wire services. And Yitzhak Adlerstein of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles picked up on this and sent me an 80th birthday congratulations. And he said, Bill, you just remember this. He said, Moses didn't really begin his career until he was 80. And so, what the saying in Hebrew is, Ad Me'av Esrim to 120. So with the Lord's help, day by day, we'll keep on moving. I want to thank you all for your love, your support. And the Masons coming all the way here from Philadelphia, John and Lori, and we worked on Cielo together. I should have mentioned that as well. That was part of our effort in renewal and regenerating here in the community. And now we still have connections through Camp Falling Spring, and you're part of the Falling Spring diaspora and the extended Falling Spring family as well, and Raina is here as well. So we are just very, very grateful that we're all here together. And what I say is the Hebrew word kadima, which is forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That Carol has had some tests. She's still getting checked out, but so far so good. So
please continue to keep her in your prayers, and we'll keep you posted. But thank you again all for coming. Really appreciate it.
And let's relax some more and mill around, and the party's not over. Well, where's the cake, Pearl?
It's inside.
The cake's inside.
Come eat some cake.
Okay, let's go eat cake.